This is Natural 5 Biology, Unit 3, Key Area 6, Part 1. Mutations are random changes to an organism's genetic material. So what this means is the DNA is being changed. This could be something as simple as a single base being changed for another, so an A could be exchanged for a T, or it could be something much more dramatic like the loss of an entire chromosome. Mutations can be either neutral, a disadvantage, or an advantage in terms of survival. Most of them fall into the categories of neutral or a disadvantage. In fact, sometimes the disadvantage can be so large that it's fatal. But once in a while, a mutation is an advantage for survival. Mutations are spontaneous, which means they just happen, and they're the only source of new alleles. So the only way DNA gets changed is through mutations. There are certain environmental factors which can increase the rate of mutations, and these include radiation such as X-rays and UV rays. In olden days, people used to X-ray children's feet to see if their new shoes were going to fit or not. So when you went to get new shoes, put the shoe on, take an X-ray and look at how the bones are sitting in there in the shoe. That was discontinued when it was discovered that taking lots of X-rays can lead to cancer. UV rays, this is from the sunlight and from sunbeds as well. Perhaps in the 1980s, a lot of people used to keep a sunbed in their house to keep an all year round tan. That has fallen very much out of fashion and been replaced by a rise in fake tanning. Because UV rays, whether they're from the sunlight or from a sunbed, can lead to skin cancer. There are also chemicals which can cause mutations, and one example is mustard gas, which was used in chemical warfare. The next section we're looking at is adaptions. You might remember back in first year learning a little bit about adaptions. You might have looked at polar bears and how their warm woolly coat keeps them warm in the Arctic. If we took a polar bear and put it in a rainforest, it would no longer have appropriate adaptions for that environment. So adaptions are very much specific to whether they are an advantage in your own environment. When we have mutations, we end up with new alleles. Remember, alleles are different forms of a gene. So we've got some new alleles as a result of mutations, and this can lead to plants and animals that are better adapted to their environment. It also increases the variety within a population. And this can be useful, for example, when a new disease comes along. If some of the members of the population are not able to get the disease, then they're more likely to survive and pass on their genes to the next generation. So variety can be useful for survival, and this increase in variety comes about through mutation. In the next video, we'll be looking at how evolution works. The final part of this video is we're going to have a look at some birds which became very famous thanks to Charles Darwin. When Charles Darwin was 20, he was offered a really fantastic job opportunity, which he took. He was offered the chance to travel around on a ship and get out wherever the ship was stopping and have a look at what animals and plants there were in that area. So he got to travel around large parts of the world. One of the most famous places he went, well, it became famous from him going there, is the Galapagos Islands. The Galapagos Islands are really remote, and what you found there was birds called finches, which have evolved to be extremely different from one another. And they came about from one single species. It's thought that one single species ended up there perhaps through a freak storm. Maybe they got blown there. We're not sure. But there were only finches on the Galapagos Islands. There weren't loads of other species of birds like you would have on the mainland. And over time, each finch species has adapted to its habitat based on what food sources are available there, and they've evolved different sizes and shapes of beak. So the difference between these finches is that they have different shapes and strengths of beak to allow them to eat whatever foods there were on the particular area of the island in which they lived. So there are a number of different islands with different conditions and no competition from other species. My favourite finch is this one, the woodpecker finch. The woodpecker finch has learned to use a spine from perhaps a cactus plant to stick into the holes in trees and pick out insects which it eats. This niche is normally fulfilled in the mainland by a woodpecker who sticks its long thin beak into holes in trees and takes insects out. Because there's no woodpeckers on the Galapagos Islands, one species of finch have learned to take over this niche by using this little spike. Another well-known finch that's quite different, this one over here, the large ground finch. The large ground finch has a really thick, strong beak, which it uses to crunch up seeds. And if you went to the Galapagos Islands and found yourself on any island at all, if you had a look at what sort of plants grow there, you would be able to figure out what kinds of foods would be available for the finches and be able to figure out which types of finch you would find there.